Welcome to another edition of the Inside Scoop. My name is Neil Crawford. I'm the host and also the founder of Anytime Soccer Training. I am happy to welcome back one of our recurring and resident experts in the field of college education, recruiting, youth soccer support services, wraparound services. Dave, I'm trying to capture it all. Dave Morris, the
If you figure
founder
out how to do it, let me know because I fail.
You know what? I'm trying to capture it all, man. But your business card is gonna. I can't even. Anyways, Dave Morris, the founder of the College Athletic Advisor, is here to talk to us about some trends, give us some good information, and then make himself available to our audience and members who want to have a more detailed conversation about their specific child. Dave, welcome to the show and tell us about College Athletic Advisor.
Okay, well, my name is Dave Morris, College Athletic Advisor, collegeathleticadvisor.com. I'm an educational consultant. I help you and I empower your student to reach his or her goals. That's really the mission. And we do that. We provide, how do we support you? How do we empower you to connect with the coaches that you want to connect with, get the feedback and information you can make good decisions, and then how to plan to get from where you are to where you want to go.
And if I understand, just the blocking and tackling is not soccer specific. It's any,
That's correct.
and it's not necessarily even athletic specific, right?
We're pretty athletic heavy. Usually athletics is kind of the skeleton key that helps you kind of unlock things. So usually I always have a couple clients. One of the things is, you reach a point in soccer or any sport where you've kind of, as a kid, run your course, And so I do work with clients particularly who, they're playing soccer, they're having a great time. They get to a point where they go, when I go to college, I'm not sure that's what I want to pursue. I'm going to be in transition at that point. And, can you use soccer? How does soccer still help you in the college application process? How does it enhance your ability to connect with the right schools? And then how do you explain what you learned in soccer and in building a community and showing leadership and all the things colleges want, even if, being a varsity soccer player isn't in your future?
Yeah. And so right before we jump into the interview, I will say this. My buddy, who his daughter is a junior in high school, my buddy sent me his daughter's resume and said, "Hey, have a look at this. She's applying to colleges. Just let me know what you think." And it was so good. I was like, I need to use this resume for myself. She has done some amazing stuff. And that got me to thinking, I'm actually going to use her resume as a sort of a blueprint to give my older son some guidance on some things that he needs to accomplish or he should try to accomplish, whether it be volunteering, whether it be travel, whether it be leadership experiences, internships, speaking engagements. Because my fear now that my older son is heading into the ninth grade is because soccer takes so much of his time. My fear is I don't want him scrambling around 11th grade trying to piecemeal something together to look good. I want him to find other activities that he actually wants to do and can learn from, but will also bolster his applications. So what do you
Well, I
think?
think people underrate how much athletics and soccer can help you with that. Schools want to see that you contribute to your community, right? And that you show leadership. So if you're playing soccer, kids say, "Oh, I don't know if I do any volunteering." Did you coach at the camp at your club? Oh yeah, I was in charge of the 9 and 10-year-olds, and I gave a talk about what it takes to play high school soccer or varsity or whatever. Dude, you're doing it. Like we can fly to Botswana to dig a water ditch or whatever, but like dig a well. But this is organic. This is contributing in your community. This is really valuable. So if to me, you want to make sure things kind of hang together and you don't want to look like you're running around padding your resume. You want it to be organic, real leadership. And to me, soccer or whatever sport is a great platform for that. There's so many good opportunities and it adds NIL value down the line.
Well, I'm
How's
so
that for a
glad you
trend?
mentioned that. That's a great segue into today's topic. So let me give you the agenda and then we're going to we're going to jump into each one. So I have in my notes NIL, the transfer portal, and the impact that has on high school recruits. The scholarships, go over the scholarship amounts for the NCAA and NAIA specifically for soccer, and then we're going to end with feedback from a podcast I did on how the parental behavior, especially online, may or may not impact a student's reputation and their chances of being accepted in receiving, say, a scholarship opportunity. So NIL, which in parent circles we started to call it the MIL. Maybe that's a bit of an extreme. But the point is, people are getting really excited about NIL. But if you're an average parent like me on the sidelines, you actually don't know literally how does this work. So let's just give us an overview on how it works and how it may or may not impact future athletes, college collegiate
Okay,
athletes.
well, let's first of all, yeah, NIL it stands for name, image, likeness, and what it really is it's your student's intellectual property, right? There was a point where the NCAA was saying you can't take any money, and college athletes were the only people in academia, adults, students, janitors, ancillary employees, whoever, who couldn't monetize their intellectual property. That was not tenable, right? So you could see the train coming. There was a lawsuit in 2009. Ed O'Bannon sued the NCAA, and the NCAA decided that they were just going to fight it, and they weren't going to plan, and they weren't. I thought, while you're fighting this losing battle that you're going to lose, you're surely planning for what's going to come next, right? Turns out I was wrong. There's no planning, and they're kind of now stuck with like really not being able to figure out what they're doing. But what NIL is so it's your intellectual property rights, and the schools can't they can't prevent you if you get a great idea for a T-shirt or the true story. One of the big early NIL moneymakers was I think it was a volleyball player at a little NAIA school called Spring Arbor in Michigan, and she was doing YouTube videos making she sheds. I'd never heard. It's a man cave, okay, for
Oh,
girls, and she was monetizing this. She was making $1 million, like in YouTube stuff. And the NAIA passed rules to make it legal. They're like, well, why would we punish her for being a successful she shed entrepreneur? And so she's doing this stuff, and that was one of the early NIL. It doesn't have to be in the sport, but she had value. And what your intellectual property becomes valuable when you're the bigger your community. So if you have really authentic connections in your community, like in real life, offline, those are valuable, and there's NIL opportunities there. If you have 1 million Instagram followers, obviously that has value. So you can name like the Cavender twins, or whatever the gymnast of the day is, or whoever, or like Caleb Williams, for football guy. So the first bucket and the fun bucket is if you have real value as a leader in your community, you can generate revenue with that.
so let's
The
think about that though. Let's break
Yeah.
that piece down. You have real value already. Now, who do you then? And you can take parking lot this and come back to this question if I'm interrupting. But then, who do you actually talk to get the ball rolling?
Well, I think first of all, if you're going to make intellectual property deals, you need an attorney. I mean, that's one of the things, right? And I'm not an attorney, so I tell people all the time, my NIL advice is general, and then if you're going to sign a contract, you get an attorney. Like, I'm related to one, and I don't play one on TV when I can help it. So that's the other part is they'll reach out to you. I mean, if you're are you wearing like Nike cleats, like take a good picture and send it to Nike and say, hey man, I don't think Nike cares, right? They've got their marketing deal down, but there's other vendors, there's other companies with doing athleisure clothing, athletic clothing, that understand that micro influencers have huge value to them. And the NIL deals go from like, well, sure, you post a picture of yourself wearing our T-shirt, and we'll give you 25% off, or we'll send you one of the free T-shirts for free, but you got to buy a couple. All the way to like, we'll pay you however much money, blah 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 blah. and that just depends on, what your following looks like, and how good a negotiator you are.
Yeah, so let me say two things on that. Number one, it sounds like if you already have a great organic following, then you get mentors and some illegal advice. And then the second thing I would say is, and while we hear about the Nikes of the world, there are millions of other companies who would kill for someone with 30,000 Facebook or Instagram or whatever followers to post the image of their product.
They may not go for 20, they may go for 10. They may have, but there's definitely a lot of companies out there, and they understand that this has value. And so,
Yes.
now you got to be careful with it, because if you're a youth athlete, not every state allows NIL for youth, right? So every state has its own laws. So you got to find out, like if you're in North Carolina, what's the North Carolina NIL law? Florida does not allow NIL for youth right now, but they may be allowing it starting in August. So you got to follow along and understand. The other piece that's really important is that, so NIL value for a very small number of athletes who have real, genuine, community followings that they can monetize. Okay. That has a lot of value. The second piece of NIL in the college game is through what are called collectives. And the NIL collectives are basically the booster clubs got together and said, okay, we'll pay the athletes. Like, what do we have to pay them? We'll give them to do some stuff, but we want to bring guys to Tennessee or wherever, and we're going to pay them off. All right. And it's legal now because of NIL. So the big money for college athletes is in the collectives, because it's based on the school's marketing, not just your individual micro influencer, 500 followers, 5,000 followers, 50,000 followers. It's a different market. So for most students, that's where the money is. All right. And it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It does matter, football's getting more of the money, basketball's getting more of the money, soccer's getting a little of the money. But if you have value, and everybody's going to get something. So, in that, if you're at that D1 NIL level, and then there's schools that, they're not in the bidding, and that's okay. Like, but understand that you don't want to have a deal that interferes with your ability to sign on with a collective. Once you sign on with a collective and you understand where you can add to that, then like, great, add. Now, the third bucket of NIL stuff is exploitative, right? There's companies that are like, you can sign this very long terms and condition thing that gives us the rights to your intellectual property. And if somebody wants to play a video game with you, we'll pay you $5. My advice is just don't do it, right? But if you want to do it, make sure you have an attorney read the contract, because a lot of those are like they're asymmetrical. You're signing away a lot of your rights for very little in return, and you should understand what you're agreeing to. And if it's exploitative, like, then you don't do it. But there's also like Cameo would be in there, right? And some people are able to monetize that, and some people really aren't. So
All
that's
right.
that's the
So
third NIL piece.
so what was the first piece? It's just your individual?
Yeah, that's where you're selling your intellectual property, like, because it has value, and brands are want to associate with you, things like that. Or, it doesn't have to be selling to brands on Instagram. It could be, public speaking. It could be having a local soccer camp. Like, you couldn't have the Joe Smith play like me, I'm at Clemson soccer camp. Now you can. And you can, use you can wear your Clemson apparel and everything.
But the only thing I heard, but I didn't catch is I thought NIL was nationwide, but and I don't understand how it's not in Florida with those two Miami Hurricane twins.
It's nationwide at the college level, but it's still, so the reason NIL exists is different states passed laws that eliminated the NCAA's ability to regulate NIL. So the NCAA basically said, all right, we won't regulate it, because we can't have one state, we can't have like California schools having an advantage over Carolina schools, right? That's not fair. So we just won't regulate. At the state level, every state has its own rules. And that's where, like in Florida, the high school kids can't do NIL.
The high school kids cannot, but the college kids can.
Absolutely.
So when you say the high school kids cannot, what do you, because no, like back in the day, I could go and create a soccer camp for myself if I was in high school. You're saying I can't do that if I'm then going to be recruited? Like I lose my
No, you can't do it and
eligibility?
play high school in Florida.
So you cannot. I'm not
Like
disagreeing.
if
I'm
you're a high
really trying
school
to be
kid in
clear.
Florida, yeah, if you're a high school kid in Florida and you try to get NIL money, then they find out about it. You're ineligible under FHSA, whatever the acronym. You can't play Florida high school. Now, you could do it and just play club,
Okay.
and it
And
won't impact your recruiting other than you won't get the exposure from high school.
and what about when we see those high school games on TV now? Are those kids making any money? And I know
Uh,
that's a general question because it depends on network,
yeah,
but
I
I'm talking
mean,
about
look, the
ESPN, for example.
yeah, the only first of all, only in states that allow NIL. And then second of all, I mean, it's like, what do you mean by making money? Like, are they getting, are some of those kids not paying to go to a private high school? 100%. Are they getting cash? Probably not. But also, like, this is where I'm a one-man band against the tide here. If you have a chance to go to the University of North Carolina, right, for free, like a football player, where it's a full ride, room, board, books, tuition, cost of attendance. You get a laptop, you get travel back and forth, you get pizza money, whatever. That's like that has like a $300,000 value. People acting like that has no value, and you're doing them a favor by showing up to play, kind of chafes my butt. Like that's not true. And we're starting out with guys who are getting at a baseline a free $300,000 education. Now you can say, well, they're not getting access to every bell and whistle because they're playing football. And like, well, what about the kid who just has to work 3 jobs to pay tuition? I mean, they have access to a $300,000 education. It's up to them. Like, I can set the table for you. You got to eat, right?
Yes.
My daughter, she sits down at the table. I cook. Some days, man, like she's not interested. Like, but that's not that she didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah, and I do think the narrative is characterized by the lack of understanding to some degree the value of this educational opportunity. And then also looking at the sort of high end 5% athlete, where the
Right.
average
You're
one
talking
is
about a
just
really small group that has
small
NIL
group of
value.
people, right? So, and I get that. All right. So if you have any more questions about NIL, folks, just comment below or reach out to Dave from the College Athletic Advisor personally, and he can break this stuff down to you. So we're gonna
Yeah,
take
and
a
if you're
quick
asking me
break
about a specific deal, I'm going to tell you to go find a lawyer. Like,
and go
just
find a
right off
lawyer.
the bat.
You better call Saul. So we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be right back.
When my sons began travel soccer, every coach and all the other parents gave us the same advice. Team training just wasn't enough. To really improve, they needed to get extra touches at home. So I wanted to help them practice at home, but I found it very difficult. I spent hours searching the internet for soccer drills. YouTube gave me a lot of ideas, but the videos were random and not follow along. I wanted a step-by-step program that went from beginner to advanced that my boys could grow into. Trust me, I tried every program imaginable. Each of them had their merits, but none of them were comprehensive enough or included fun games. I knew my sons needed to work on dribbling, passing, receiving, ball mastery, finishing, and so much more. Fast forward to when I began coaching and all the parents had the same problem. I knew that the couple of hours that they were with me was not enough, but I had no way of giving all the kids easy to follow homework and then tracking to see who did it. Sure, I would send my teams random YouTube videos, but they weren't follow along, they weren't easy to use, and I had no way of rewarding those players who made the extra effort. I created Anytime Soccer Training to solve these problems and more. The application is easy to use. Every video is 100% follow along, and the program covers everything. It's the only online training program with literally thousands of training videos and hundreds of fun games and skills challenges. With Anytime Soccer Training, Coaches can assign homework, track their players' progress, and even give rewards. And parents have a one-stop solution for in-home training. Check out Anytime Soccer Training today and, like me, help your child build skill and confidence on and off the pitch.
All right. So, Dave, now let's talk about, so we talked about NIL, and now let's talk about the transfer portal.
Okay. I
And
have a suggestion. Why don't we flip it? Why don't we do scholarships since we're talking money, and then we'll do the portal?
okay, so let's talk scholarships then. Let's talk
All
about the number of scholarships at the NCAA and then the NAIA, and then anything else I've missed in regards to scholarships. Let's talk about it.
All right. So if you're a parent, I think honestly worrying about Division One NCAA men's soccer, the limit is 9.9 equivalencies. Okay. Division Two, it's 9 equivalencies. Not surprisingly, there's very little difference in quality between Division One, Division Two, and Division Three in soccer. The NAIA technically allows 12 equivalencies. Okay. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a parent and you're worried about learning those numbers, you are wasting your time. The salient thing is that it's an equivalency scholarship. If you want your kid to get a full ride, like football, men's basketball, right? Or have a girl, right? Because girls, it's basketball, tennis, volleyball, gymnastics. I think that's it. I might be missing one. Those are full ride head count sports. So like if you get a Division One volleyball scholarship, there's 350 NCAA Division One volleyball schools. And if you sign a scholarship at one of those, you don't pay anything. Room, board, books, fees, cost of attendance, the whole bit, you got it. All right. In football, there's 120, 130 Division One FBS schools where the scholarships are head count and everybody's on a full ride. The rest of Division One is what's called FCS, the championship subdivision, right? And those are equivalency scholarships. Now they have a lot of them. So there are kids who are on a full ride, even in that FCS, but they can cut those up. And there are plenty of guys. You watch South Dakota State play in the NCAA championship, or North Dakota State, or whoever it is, Valdosta, there's kids on those rosters paying tuition. Okay. So just, if you're a soccer mom or dad, the thing to understand is that you're only allowed 9.9 scholarships on a roster of like 25 to 30 guys, right? So your kid is going to pay to go to college. That's the salient, like that's number one. Like it's very hard. If every soccer kid whose parents said they had a full ride, we could retire the national debt today. All right, just flat out. And people don't even get it. They're like, oh, I got a full ride. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, how much did you have to borrow? And they're like, oh, well, I had to take out the federal student loans and a plus loan. Well, you didn't get a full ride. You're paying, dude. You're not paying any cash. That's not the same thing as a full ride. But so what you're getting in soccer is you're getting a discount. All right. And the discount can be structured a couple different ways. You can call it an athletic scholarship, right? Why? Here's a good question. How do you, like, what's the difference between a Division I school and a Division II school or a Division III school? How do you pick? And people say, oh, well, big schools are D1. And I laugh at them and I go, well, Mount St. Mary's of Maryland has about 1,000 students and they're D1. New York University has 69,000 students and they're Division III. So it's not size. Also, if you win the D3 national championship, what happens next year? You go back to D3 and you try to win it again. You don't get promoted, right? Also, the way you do it is the school picks. And the difference is how they want to discount. The average discount at an American private college is 54%. That's the average discount. The way that you do it if you're a private school in the United States of America in 2024 is you tell everybody your sticker price tuition is $1 zillion, but you're going to give them a deal.
Okay.
They should just make it transparent. In Portland,
Hold
they
on,
said, we're going
it
to do
froze.
that. We'll just
Hey,
cost
Dave,
$25,000.
sorry
The enrollment dropped
Dave,
33%.
sorry to interrupt. It froze. I heard
Yeah,
a
no.
$1 million sticker price, and then you give them a deal. And then what did you say after that?
Okay, then yeah, it's like, let me think for a minute. Okay, so yeah, you get $1 million, right? And then you give them a big discount, and that's what people want. They want that giant discount. And there's people complain. They're like, "Oh, why don't the colleges just tell me what they cost, and that's it?" Well, because people won't go to those schools. They want the discount. They will not. If you cut out the discount thing, you lose enrollment. So that's the game. And so athletic scholarships, people will pay more to get an athletic scholarship than they will to get like an academic scholarship or a discount or whatever else they call it. That's just a fact of life. So there's the NAIA schools and the Division II schools give athletic scholarships because they can charge more tuition.
So let me ask
The
you
other
two questions
thing
on
is,
this.
yeah,
And one of them, I mean, I'm sorry if they're dumb questions, but I just want to be clear about this. But what about, we talked about the size doesn't matter, but what about the academic standards of, say, a Division I school in an NAIA?
it really depends on the school. Every division, Division I includes Harvard, and it includes, I hate to use a specific school. It includes large and small universities that accept 100% of students and are not known for providing. It includes, let's pick one. Grand Canyon University, a for-profit school where, pretty much if you can pay, they're going to take it. Like,
Okay.
and Division III includes some of the best colleges in the United States, University of Chicago, Emory, whatever. And also some pretty small private colleges where they pretty much take everybody who walks in the door and do the best they can, right? And in Division II, it goes from, Division II and the NAIA don't have as many of the super high-end schools. But at the same time, like Colorado Mines is Division II. It's a terrific school. Like there's good, and there's for NAIA, I mean, like I've always been really impressed with like, Benedictine in Kansas. And I mean, there's some really good colleges in the NAIA, do a great job. And, they're just smaller. The difference from the NAIA and the NCAA is in the NAIA, you're giving up some branding because the NCAA is like the brand, but you also don't have to pay for some of the compliance and other stuff that, college, if you're NCAA, it costs more to be in the NCAA than it does the NAIA.
Understood. So, I'm gonna say something that I commonly hear, and you tell me if this is if this is right, or you give some detail around this. Parents might say, well, if you're really good in soccer, the coach might give you, and I'm gonna make this number up, 25% scholarship. And then he or she will work with the admissions department if you have good grades to make up the rest.
Well,
That's
I
a
don't know about
general
make up.
statement. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, I think what I tell kids is, listen, man, no matter how good a soccer player you are, every 10th of a point you can raise your GPA is going to give you more options, better options, and cheaper options. Because athletics is just one part of the discount. Or in Division III, it's 0 part of the discount. But the rule, NCAA Division III, you're in compliance with their no athletic scholarship rule as long as your athletes in total don't have more than a 5% bigger discount than your student body overall. So in Division III, like, are they favoring athletes? Yes. Like, if a coach wants you, they're going to be aggressive in discounting.
Oh, okay. So they could even, so a discount may or may not even be quote unquote a scholarship. It can just be, we're going to give you this discount.
All a scholarship is a discount in soccer, right? Like, I had a kid called me and said, I got a $20,000 scholarship. I said, great, coffee's on you, right? He's like, no, I got to pay 30 to take it. I don't know where I'm going to get 30. I'm like, they're not giving you anything. Like, if you walk into a car dealer and they go, oh, well, today the car's 50, we'll give it to you for 30. They're not giving you anything. They're selling something.
That's
And
a good way of thinking about it.
And the thing that gets me is like, and the worry I have with like recruiting services is they'll say, oh, we got this kid a $30,000 scholarship to some college. I'm like, Well, if you didn't tell them anything about sports, they would have given you a $40,000 scholarship. You just paid 10 grand extra.
Oh, I didn't. I definitely didn't think of that. Okay, so interesting.
Excuse me.
Let's end the scholarship. Oh, go ahead. You gonna say something else?
No, go ahead. You're good.
So let's end the scholarship conversation with just the blocking and tackling, just for people to reel them off. How many scholarships per division going down to NAIA? And I didn't know this part about the Division III. There's a no athletic scholarship policy. Just
Right, but that doesn't mean they don't discount. So it's 9.9 for D1, it's 9 for D2, it's 12 in the NAIA, but those numbers don't matter. All right. You got to find a school that fits. If you're at the right school, it's going to be affordable. If you're putting your college education on a credit card, you're in the wrong place. It is that simple. And the other thing is, in the middle of the season, you cannot tell. Like, I coached in the NAIA Division 1, 2, 3. You go to practice, you got your conference tournament, you got nationals. The only difference is the logo on the field. All right. That's it. And who sends you the spam emails.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the thing that's salient is if you're at the right school, you're going to be able to afford it because they're going to make it work.
Perfect. Okay, so now let's go to the transfer portal if it's not confusing enough. So
Well,
I do think
we can make this really easy.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, it's really important people understand the transfer rules for soccer haven't changed in like 60 years. Okay. The transfer portal was just a better database so college coaches can see who's trying to transfer. All right. But the rule hasn't changed. You can transfer now. Actually, that's not totally true because the NCAA just lost in court. You used to be able to transfer once and play immediately. But if you tried to transfer again after that, you had to sit. Right now, the NCAA has lost the ability to regulate that. So you can transfer as many times as you want, in theory. The problem is the more you transfer, the harder it is to graduate. And most people do want to graduate from college. So you want to go to a school with the idea that you're going to go to school there and it's a great fit. But you're not stuck. You're not locked in. And I think that's really valuable. During COVID, the transfer portal was combined with like this gigantic group of kids who had like 6-7 years of eligibility because of COVID. And it was weird. And kids were having a hard time getting recruited at 18 because you could recruit a 23-year-old who was like already all conference. So why not recruit that kid? That balloon is kind of empty, right? Like the COVID kids the kids who are in college now went through COVID while they were in like middle school, right? Or high school. So it's not an issue. The COVID waivers are gone. So the transfer portal, it's made the system a little bit more efficient. Like if you're really good and nobody saw you play and you're killing it someplace, you can market yourself a second time, right? Or if your coach leaves, you can hop in the portal. And 25% of colleges, the coach leaves every year, right? Like 25% of coaches turn over every year. This year in Division I soccer was like 30-something%, so those kids can leave if they want, which is fair, right? Like if your coach ditches, like, why should you be stuck if that was part of the deal? But also, like, you should pick the school. So hopefully you're someplace you want to be. Like that. So that it's a two-way street, but the transfer portal has made the process a little bit easier. It's also allowed us, it used to be that kids would quit playing and nobody was keeping track of that. Now kids will get in the portal and then quit. So we have a number. We kind of know that there's about 30% of freshmen who play bail and go into, like, they go in the transfer portal and they just don't play. So we know those kids are quitting now. And I think people worry about that, but I think it's misinformation. To me, like, the key with the transfer portal, if you're getting into it, is you want to make sure you plan ahead and you've got video and you've got a plan. If you just get in the portal because you think you're awesome, like, that may not work out very well. For freshmen, if you're a high school kid, the thing to know is that, yes, at the very top schools, they may recruit a couple kids who are 22, 23 rather than an extra freshman. But every opportunity that gets sucked up at that school is by definition pulling somebody out of another school. So it's the same number of opportunities, you're just moving them around.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So you got to kind of think about, like, okay, and I think it's made junior college a little bit less attractive because it's harder to transfer from a 2-year school. You got to make sure you're eligible and all that. If you're going from a 4-year school to a 4-year school, a lot of that falls away. You just have to worry about making sure you're on track with your classes.
So the part about the impact on a high school freshman is a bit of musical chairs, and I have to think about math because it's kind of like a bit of musical chairs and timing and stuff. But let's say, for the sake of argument, there are 100 available freshman scholarships, and we're just using slots or whatever. Before the
Right.
transfer portal, they will be filled by some freshmen, and then you
Well, there
always
were still
had.
transfers. It was
I,
just
I, I
it was
know I
just
didn't.
less efficient. Yeah.
I didn't say that right. It would be a combination of freshmen coming in and some transfer. Now, and let's just say that transfers could be 10% when it was inefficient. And so now what I'm trying to understand is, are there less freshmen being recruited because that there's more flexibility, no, more velocity in the amount of people that are transferring? Or is this it's like musical chairs that end up just going somewhere else? That's what I can't
I think
picture.
it's more musical chairs. I think there's, it's some of this, like, look, it's a little bit of a cheat code. If you're at a school that kids really want to transfer into, you can add a couple of kids out through the transfer portal instead of some other freshmen. But you got to remember, it's not really 100 slots, right? My roster's not I could have 25 kids or I could take 27. So I'm not replacing everybody. It's not a 1-to-1. But the other part is, if I'm grabbing a couple kids from, like, let's say, so this is, I worked with a transfer kid who was at Loyola Chicago and was a all conference athlete and transferred to Penn to go to Wharton and compete at Penn. So that opens up a spot at Loyola. Like, it didn't necessarily take away a spot at Penn, but even if it did, it opened up a chair at Loyola.
And so what does the transfer portal look like? Is it some kind of website? What
It's
is
a
it literally?
database and yeah, the way you get on transfer portal is you email the compliance director at your college if you're an NCAA Division 1 or 2 athlete. Otherwise, you're not really in the portal, you're just transferring. And they put you into a database in their NCAA computer system that coaches can see.
And is it true that the vast majority of students who athletes who enter in the transfer portal are not picked up?
No, it's not true. There definitely are a substantial percentage. I don't know if it's half, it's less than half, I think, but there are definitely kids who go in the transfer portal and end up with not options they don't want and just don't play.
Oh, so I meant, all right, let me be clear on the phrasing. So I was under the impression that the majority of kids do not get picked up.
Yeah, I don't think that's that's not true. Like, I haven't seen any data to support that. But there's a group of athletes, and it's 30 or 40% who go in the portal and end up going, you know what, I'm just not going to play.
Now, is it one of those situations where they have these conversations, and you can tell me about the rules surrounding it, but they have these sidebar conversations and then enter into the portal as just a formality?
Well, you're not supposed to do that. Well, it depends. Okay. In Division 3, you can self-release and you get 30 days to talk to people before you got to tell your coach. And
Oh,
and it's a self-release, so there's nobody policing the 30 days, right? NAIA is a whole other, I don't know what their deal is. They don't have a portal. If you start talking to people, like, I don't know, the colleges are not supposed to talk to kids who are not in the transfer portal. But you can hire somebody like me, right? And I can ask coaches, like, I'm not going to say, like, hey, you want to recruit Joe Smith, but I can say, like, hey, I've had an inquiry from a student whose profile looks like this. You're running a 400, which, it has a 4.0 GPA at this school. Is that somebody you'd be interested in recruiting? right? And a coach will say yes or no, right? So I can say like, yes, you have a market at these schools, right? Um, so I can do that. The other thing is, kids talk to kids, right? Soccer's not that big a world. So like if I'm uh like let's say I'm a defender and I play for let's say Iona College or Iona University, right, in New York, and I want to transfer. Well, I got buddies who play at Babson and at Fordham and at Bentley and at Tufts. And I can call all my friends and say, hey man, think that like if I want to get out of here, is there a spot? And they can ask their coach, like, hey, I got a buddy. And the coach will be like, yes, no. I mean, that's not against the rules. So is it a sidebar? Is it dirty? I don't think so. I think it's like people are people and they do try. My suggestion is don't get it. I tell kids, don't get in the portal till you've done your homework.
And I didn't know. So and this is Dave Morris with the College Athletic Advisor. So people who are in school who are considering transferring, whether it be in the portal or not, they can reach out to someone like you and you can help them think through it because you've dealt with so many kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of my free services is I'll spend an hour talking you out of transferring, to be totally honest. It's a terrible business model. I can't charge for it, but it's definitely a service. Because a
Okay,
lot
I
of
mean
times
that's
when kids want to get in the portal, and I'm like, look, man, there's a girl. I know this girl dumped you. Let me tell you, wherever you're going, there's another one, and she's going to dump your ass just as hard. So like, you got to get over it. That's not why you transfer.
which I think there's probably lesser reasons that people transfer even than that. Like your coach said something you don't like, you're gonna transfer. Now,
Well,
when
we
you
talk it
start thinking
through.
of,
Yeah,
oh, now this is beyond the scope of this is higher than our pay grade, but I'll be interested in your opinion. When you start, you've heard commentary from Dion. You just saw that Nick Saban retired. Some other high profile coaches are retiring, and there's this conversation about coaches. They really can't. It's hard for them to invest the time to develop players. Putting all the politics and the players not getting paid, I'm very sensitive to this fact that your base, call them employees, student athletes, whatever, you want to develop them, but why am I going to invest all this time in developing them when I don't know if they're even going to be there? And I have to spend time recruiting my own team every year in addition to recruiting external players. So how do you feel about that, especially in college football, soccer to a lesser extent?
yeah. I have. Well, soccer has as many transfers as football. I think. I mean, I guess to me, like I have very limited sympathy. If you're a coach, you're going to coach. If you're Nick Saban and you're like 80 years old, you coached a long time, and it's a good time to go out more or less on top, right? He had a hell of a year last. I mean, he really. I mean, that team looked like they were dead and buried. They went all the way to the semifinal or whatever. Uh, Yay for them. Good job, Nick Saban. Like, great time to go. There's a group of people I don't have any sympathy for. It's a bunch of coaches making multi-million-dollar, who are the highest paid people in their states. If you don't want to do the work, someone else will. I love you. I wish you well. Good for you. Uh, I think every time the college game evolves, there's people who go, you know what? I don't want to evolve with it. And I respect that's a professional choice, and I wish him well, and I think it's great, and I respect that. But there was the same thing happen when student athletes stopped being like slaves basically in the 70s, and you had to start treating people like human beings. And there were coaches who didn't want to do that, like Bobby Knight had trouble with that. And those guys retired. So it's a different, they come for you at different times. If you're not going to change, the world does, and you got to adjust, you know? I think one of the real case studies is at Kentucky, right? Rick Pitino and like all these young kids. And with the transfer portal, he's in there coaching the hell out of a bunch of 18-year-olds and he's playing 23-year-olds and he's not doing that well. And, like it's just he wants to do it one way. The rules changed and created a path that put him at a disadvantage instead of an advantage. And he stuck with. I respect him. He stuck with it. He's doing what he's doing. Darn it. And I think it's great. And I think it's fun to watch. And but I'd understand if he said, you know what, I'm frustrated or whatever. I mean, and it is college is tough, like recruiting and college coaching or coaching's a grind, right? It's a tough job. And there's a whole bunch of people sitting in the stands who think they could do it better. And eventually sometimes people get tired of it. Good for them.
Yeah, and I understand that. And so we're gonna leave it out to the group to, share their own opinions on it. I definitely can see that anytime there's change, people are gonna want to jump ship. I also can see I can see both sides of it, but I think some of it has to be from a macro level. How do you view the role of college sports in our society?
Yeah, and I
And
think
yeah,
there's an adjust. The NCAA has to figure out, right? Like you've got this weird tail wagging the dog right now, right? You've got like out of 1,000, what is it, 1,200 or 1,300 NCAA schools, something like that. You've got like 50 football programs that are kind of wagging the dog, and people want to make policy for 1,200 colleges based on 50 football programs. And the NCAA is going to have to sit everybody down and figure out, because there are probably, like, you can't have a bunch of kids on your campus generating $1 billion a year, like who get pizza money. Meanwhile, their coaches are making $1 billion. Like, that doesn't work. But at the same time, they are getting a $300,000 education. That's not nothing. And it's not they're, are they I don't think that the employee thing is necessarily the best way to go. I think the colleges are going to have to figure out, however they're going to do it. How do we redefine the intercollegiate athletic experience for everybody and make sure that people are not being exploited? How are we going to do that? And I don't, I'm not smart enough to have the answer ready for everybody, but I think it's going to take hard discussions that bring a lot of different people into the room. And I'm not sure that the NCAA has the current leadership to do it. But I think, whether they want to do it or not, it's going to happen.
absolutely. So I'm sitting here with Dave Morris, of the founder and CEO of the College Athletic Advisor. Dave, this is the last topic. I did a podcast where I just shared my personal opinions. I love doing that, having fun with the audience,
Yep.
where I basically said, look, there's this social media post that kind of makes its rounds every year, where it admonishes parents not to uh, it admonishes them not to publicly criticize coaches or misbehave online, as this may impact their child's chances of receiving a college athletic scholarship. And my whole thing was, as someone who has been in leadership and had to evaluate people, I try to evaluate them on what they do, what they say, how they act, and to the extent possible, segregate that from their surroundings. That was the gist of it. And I had a good conversation with you. First of all, that's kind of where most coaches are. And secondly, it's a lot more complicated than that at times. So I wanted to
Yep.
use this platform as an opportunity to talk about some of the do's and don'ts, share some personal experiences, even if that's anecdotally, and how should we, as parents, in this social media age, it is what it is, think about the this whole how we are coming off, or how we're being perceived, and what impact that could have on our children.
Yeah, first of all, I'm with you. I agree. I think it, like, the whole, well, you better behave, because some of it's a power thing, right? Like, you better behave or there's going to be dark punishment behind it, whatever. Uh, to me, like, the reality is, I mean, always it's a good policy not to be a jerk, whether it's online or in person. Like, don't be a jerk, right? Like, that's always a good rule. Okay. But that doesn't mean that everything's always hunky-dory and you can't be critical at times. I think you can. I think it always pays to be, the more, it's the same old story, right? You catch more, what is it? You catch more bees with honey than with vinegar, like, if you're going to say, like, hey, I don't like this, there's a way to do it that brings people together, and there's a way to do it where you kind of atomize things. And I think everybody in the cold light of morning knows that one is more effective than the other most of the time. Okay. Also, if you're that unhappy, move your kid. Like, don't play for some place that's really messed up, right? Like, get out of there. It's not that hard. There's a lot of places to play. Uh, so that's the first thing. Like, I'm not a big fan of visiting, and I don't think college coaches want to visit the sins of the parents onto the kids. Okay, that's not it. But there are, there is some risk if you can't see beyond your own kid's experience in athletics, college coaches are building a community, right? We're not just bringing your son or daughter to campus, we're bringing you too, right? Most of the time, like as a college coach, I tried pretty hard not to ever know the parents' names. Like I really didn't want to know. I wanted to know the kid, and that's how we're going to do it. That was a real privilege, right? To me, like that, I could do that. But it's not every coach's privilege. And there's times when you're building a community where you look at a kid and you go, this is someone who can bring a lot of talent, but they're also going to bring some baggage. And you got to decide whether you're going to recruit that kid or somebody else with less baggage and hope that they're going to have that much talent. And that's just a choice you have to make. And so I think most of the time, coaches' talent's going to win out. You want good players, man. Everybody thinks they can. In the coaching parlance, we think we can bring them to the cross, right? Like they'll stop being a pain in the neck and they'll be fine. But there are kids whose parents are so disruptive that they do fall in the recruiting, kind of rankings, or not. Coaches who have a lot of options go, you know what? I don't need to deal with that. And I always say the story I tell is I went to a game to watch a young woman play, and got to the field and she wasn't playing, and she came on, and she was a really good fit for what we were doing. I was like, this is the kind of kid we could recruit, right? And I was standing next to a parent, and I asked him, I said, hey, tell me about this team, and he started complaining. And he spent the entire 45-minute half. The coaches are terrible. They don't respect my daughter. They treat her bad. And meanwhile, I'm watching, right? I'm watching her play and her teammates cheer for her. And I'm watching because she's not an all-star. She's someone who needs people around her to make her successful. And they're working hard to do that, right? And then this dad is crapping all over them for 45. I mean, he didn't even take a breath, man. I said, hey, who's your kid? And he's like, that's my daughter. I said, cool, man, thanks. It was great to meet you. And I got in my car and I left. And we didn't recruit that young woman. And you can tell me I'm visiting the sins of the father, but I'm thinking there is no way I'm bringing that guy into my community. That is not happening. And I think that you have a right as a coach to build your community. And you got to be, when people talk about online, like, if you're outspoken online, if you say, I don't want, you're fine. I mean, coach is going to even notice. Now, if you're making all kinds of crazy, like if you're disruptive, like everybody knows social media, right? And there can be these pileups that are unfair, but there's also people who kind of disturb things a lot. And, like people are rational actors and they're going to decide whether that's something they want to put up with or not. And it doesn't mean your kid won't get recruited. But I think, if you're really negative all the time, like, well, there are people who value not that, right? So, I think it's naive to just think, well, I should be able to do whatever I want and it shouldn't impact anything is not really a tenable place to stand either, right? I don't post every single thought that I have online, partially because I think I don't need to show people when I'm not very smart, but also because like, if I have an opinion that's going to upset 50% of the people who want my help, that's not valuable to share online.
Yeah. And so I felt like you were talking to me, Dave. I'm actually calming it down a little bit online as well because I'm so passionate about this stuff. And then we just go into these rabbit holes. And the bottom line is, look, coaches and everybody wants to do the best they can. Nobody gets into coaching. I don't care how rich they are now. No, they all started as grad assistants at the best. Nobody gets into coaching because they want to go and deny a deserving kid, an opportunity. But the reality is the
Absolutely.
reality. People can destroy what you're trying to do, and they have to serve a community. They have to serve they have to serve a school. They have to serve, and then they have to also evaluate if this child is going to even stay with us.
Right.
And
Well, and
yeah,
yeah,
go
and
ahead.
if I bring in the wrong parent, man, I get fired. Now my family has to move.
Yeah, so this is a cautionary tale to say, we are in a world where people are watching you and evaluating you, and people understand that folks are going to have experiences and vent sometimes. That's normal, but don't be a distraction. You know, don't be a distraction for your child. This thing is not about you anyways. It's about them. You're just there to help guide them through a process and get the right resources in place to help them. But don't put yourself in front of what your child is trying to do. Guys, this is Neil Crawford, founder of Anytime Soccer Training, also the host of the Inside Scoop. I just sat down with Dave Morris, the CEO of the College Athletic Advisor. Dave, you're going to drop your website and stuff in the show notes and in the Facebook group so that people can learn and get in contact with you.
Awesome. It's always a pleasure. You know that.
All
We have a
right.
great time. We run long every time.
We go long every time, but I hope it's some good information for folks. And definitely, again, if you have specific questions, please reach out to Dave personally. He is more than happy to help you.
Thanks.